observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, Eastern Standard Time, Revolution Radio Studio A. Thank you for letting us chat about important issues in our world. We see 50 different dots that others don't see, so we try to combine those into a wider picture because you need to lay it all out on the table to get a larger glimpse. So even those in power can see that we understand the entire game, that it's all on the table for everybody to see. That's where it needs to go to. And that's why we have these conversations every Thursday night. Another dot in the matrix, unraveled and revealed. So Ransom and I have been chatting back and forth, and, I've been watching this movie, The Great Taking. And not only am I enthralled by it, but I'm terrified by it. And the way that we consider money and monetary system is being bent and morphed and has been since the 1960s in earnest, when all these plans were in play to get us to the point where we are now. And I guarantee I'm absolutely saying that at that time they understood the cycles in the sun and the solar activity changes that were going to limit global food production at this time in the middle 2020s, as well as the magnetic anomaly setting up for October of 2024. At that point, they understood that the chaos that was naturally occurring and sweeping through the planet would be enough to reset the financial system at the same time and try to come out on the other side still holding the reins of control, continuity of government, better planning. So it all does dovetail into, I think this might be one of the missing pieces of the Rubik's Cube for me, and that's why I kind of just been glued into it. So if I didn't send the show notes out today to everybody who's signed up for the show notes here for the Mini Ice Age Conversations Live radio show, please remember oilseedcrops.org. That again is oilseedcrops.org. You can go there and click the box in the navigation bar up there that says show notes for the live show here. I just kind of got wrapped into this whole thing today where I couldn't put it down. So if you're interested in our show notes, please do, because I'm really going to start to reference a lot of things. I probably took like 7 pages written on my own handwriting on my own A4 paper watching this hour and 20-minute documentary, and I still haven't finished it yet. This thing is a mind bender at best, and it should be listed in a horror movie category versus an economic documentary. It should be the number one listing in the scariest movies ever made. Because when you look at this plan that's happening or planned to happen, everything in the world makes sense, right down to the Red Sea disruptions. And now Malaysia says that nothing transiting to Israel can enter its waters or use its port facilities. The run around the Cape of Good Hope, like everything we're seeing, everything in today's world. The Russia-Ukraine conflict over food in the grow zones in Ukraine. Everything after watching this movie is scarily makes sense. And Ransom, I know, we get into a few diatribes about different reasonings for things on the planet, but I'm going to say that my forecast for electromagnetic anomaly in 2024 at the end in October still makes sense, because the elite are following the timeline of the sun. Solar activity is their timeline, not anything that we as humans are doing on this planet. They're following the sun, the moon, the stars, the heavens. There shall be signs. That's their roadmap. So anyway, thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, I just speaking of magnetics and our magnetic field, I was just reading a paper the last couple of days that really explains why, because I've been looking at a lot of ancient sites and there's a lot of mysteries out there, and one of the mysteries is why they orientated some of the I don't know what to call them, ruins, some people call them like a chapel or something like that, some kind of religious thing. But it's basically early man was trying to either rebuild or create a map of not only the stars but time, because our ancestors were really taken in by this concept of linear existence. And if you know a lot about the ancient sites, the oldest ones are tilted. They're not at true north and south, east and west. Like the Great Pyramid is, but stuff like Tiwanaku not. There's a site in Idaho that's, relatively, I guess, unexplored or unexplained. Nobody knows who even built it or anything. It's these giant geoglyphs, earth mound combination. And when you look at the pattern of those, the oldest ones are also tilted, where the true north and true south are not on there. And some of the oldest pyramids in China, the ones where they found the big 6 foot tall blonde Aryan mummies with swastikas and all that weird stuff. And now they try to grow forest over them. It seems that later Chinese emperors took a hold of those and were inspired by them, and they seem to predate the Chinese civilization. But the oldest of those are also tilted. So there is a dispute on who the people were and who built the pyramids, etc. But what's not in dispute is that the oldest ones are not built true north and south. So I was reading this paper that was basically explaining that they think they were just using magnets. And at the time when they were trying to align these monuments, the magnetic field, the geomagnetic north, was not anywhere near where it is today. And over time, that straightened out more to a true north and south. And now, as you know, it's starting to go, past on the other side towards the area. But for a good period, relatively close to the, the actual North Pole versus the magnetic North Pole. But for a while in history, they were relatively close to the same thing. But this insinuates that the magnetic field or the magnetic pole was very far away from what we think of today. And that's why everything's misaligned of a certain age back in time, because they were using magnets to align their big things they were making, big pyramids, big earthworks, et cetera, et cetera. And this is something that I have noticed in several cultures, like from Göbekli Tepe, where they slowly oriented the structures to a different cardinal direction. And then you also find that with some of the ancient Minoan ruins, some of their oldest temples were tilted. And now it kind of makes sense that maybe, mankind has gone through several of these magnetic excursion events, which threw their understanding of the universe in disarray, especially, like with fundamental things like direction, north to south. And you have an idea of your three-dimensional mapping of where things are at, and then it changes over time. For ancient man, I'm sure that was confusing, but that seems to be a piece that's missing in a lot of the story there. Not only that ancient people were high-tech enough to use magnets to figure out which direction that they were going and align their monuments, but also that the fact that periodically these moving around, at least the geomagnetic pole. So, what does that insinuate? Well, it insinuates activity by the sun, right? And we pretty much know that those two things are intertwined. And not only that, we know that, like when comets dive on the sun, it usually has a repercussion, and then that repercussion has a repercussion, and it's a domino effect. And I guess the biggest question that we're at in this time is that cycle that the sun goes through, many different cycles, I'm sure, not just the basic ones that everybody knows, but a lot longer in period of time compared to what we've been able to establish as a historical timeline for sun events. We have no idea the real cycle. So it could be that, every single glacial and interglacial, not could be, I'm saying it is directly related to the sun's activity. So it brings the question, when you see the magnetic field collapsing today, and you know that the last time that happened, the other forms of human basically disappeared off the face of the earth. And not only that, there were between the species of humans around that time, and I'm going to say like between 50 and 40,000 years ago, and then they all went extinct. Now, is it because, directly related to the amount of UV that was coming in? Is it just because, coincidentally people new technologies, because the ones that they had were changing? It brings a lot of questions into the loop. And then whenever you get some kind of understanding of those questions, it begs to the question, what about today? What kind of, repercussions will the sun have with our civilization? And what does that mean about who goes forward in time? And this time is different from any other time in the past, because now you have a giant technological cabal that probably knows the cycles better than anything that we can discover, a little more accurate maybe, or a better indication on when things are going to happen, because they have the oldest of human records that I'm sure there's lots of puzzle pieces we don't have that are there. This time they can kind of control which form of human comes out on the other end. So, and I'm talking in a more of a long-term, type of scenario, but what we're seeing now is the first stages, or the first birth pains of that new world, of a completely designed and created from scratch world that is in someone else's image, not the image that we were created in. They're trying to hijack life as it exists on this planet, and they're using AI to do it. Now, that brings in a lot of questions, because we don't really know, as far as being on this level of the pyramid, is there something above humans that is programming the AI? Where are they getting the programming? Where are they getting the prompts? Where are they getting the commands to create an AI-controlled system that's so intertwined with every aspect of the human domain that it's literally camouflaged right before our eyes? Like, we're so entrenched in technology today that people have no clue, because there's kind of a wool over their eyes that keeps them in this, I'm going to say pre-9/11 thought process of how the world works. And now, everything from entertainment to who's going to war. And I just read another paper that was talking about how far advanced the AI is. It totally recognizes any kind of fossil or piece of an animal about 50 to 75% more correct than any human dug to identify what animal that was. So AI is going to give us an idea of what our future looks like, but it's going to control it. And right now, even the sciences and educations are somewhat controlled by this through the top. The question is coming the prompts. Where is it coming from? Because all of the edicts, programs, et cetera, that they are pushing down through the AI system, which means these world governance programs of eliminating this compound or that compound, or who gets to eat what and when. Who is controlling that? Because it seems undoubtedly anti-human in nature.
It is an anti-human agenda, isn't it? And speaking of where a solar event or an event from the sun could go in terms of magnetism, I wanted to announce I read and heard the passing of Douglas Vogt. And if anybody's familiar with him, he has been the #1 researcher on the solar micronova. He was even a consultant with our own U.S. government to design doors that would withstand 6,000-foot waves crashing into mountainsides. That's how seriously he was taken with the micronova research and event, and he also pinged it down to cycles, and the next one inbound is supposed to be 2047. Now, he was 76 years old, but he did pass quite suddenly. He's been doing a lot of videos lately, connecting a lot of pieces of puzzles, and suddenly he just passes one day. But the way I looked at him, he looked like he was somebody in his 50s, the energy of a 50-year-old, still cranking out the videos. He didn't look sick, never talked about being sick. What he did talk about was where are the safety zones, and what he was going to bring out next were who were the funders of said projects. And then he mysteriously, or maybe he just passed of old age, but his next video series was going to be who was funding the projects that already knew in advance of this cataclysm inbound. That's for the equivalent, that would be like releasing the Jeffrey Epstein logs. But who's funding the digging and blast door construction engineering firms that were hired by the DOD, the amounts of money paid, the materials involved, the thickness of the doors, and like the schematics for that engineering diagram? Because after he was reviewing, it's like it's all wrong. It's on the wrong side of it's on the wrong facing side of things, and the doors aren't thick enough. So he was trying to come clean with us here out into the public to explain to us, and again, put it all on the table. Who's funding it? The doors aren't strong enough. Don't go into these if you're invited. And then suddenly and mysteriously he passes away. Sad, because I've spoken with him several times, and we had emails back and forth, and he always would invite me to check out his new videos. And you know, he was really tight with Ben Davidson at the Suspicious Observers, and the whole crowd kind of runs together in terms of earth changes on the timelines that we're seeing currently. So from my estimation, you know, we are definitely on a solar timeline that's coming in with magnetic changes. And how quickly are they now orienting runway landing strips? They're repainting those nearly weekly now. The southern magnetic anomaly was so strong the last solar storm, which Ransom and I had spoken about 2 programs ago, with the coronal hole that looked like, you know, different, like Don't Tread on Me snake and different thing. At the same time, the Halo CME came ripping down through the Earth's magnetic field lines, and orange aurora were pounding through. This is a direct reflection. At that time, they would not allow airliners to travel through, in and around that area of the southern magnetic anomaly off of Argentina. There was no aircraft travel allowed in that area during that geomagnetic storm. Like, it's to the point now where it's disrupting our air travel across the planet. Currently, it's in the southern hemisphere. But where will it lead to? I mean, how deep can this go? How much longer is it going to intensify? Well, from all estimations in my research, too, we're just at the cusp of it really getting very noticeable, and it directly dovetails into why the Great Reset is here. Why is the Great Taking occurring right this second and planned and poised to in 2024? That's the whole thing. The timelines dovetail and parallel each other. The larger the amount of Earth changes and geomagnetic anomalies and magnetic freak show, for a better term, these things that we haven't seen in thousands of years reoccurring, is definitely disrupting now in real time our ability to grow, harvest crops. It's affecting our computers. It's affecting the internet. It's affecting airline travel. And it's only from here going to intensify through what Douglas had and Ben have come up with some different conclusions. 2047. Now, Valentina Zarkova's research and a few others, Piers Corbin, who's that? Pukovo Observatory. Oh, Dr. Abudzhamatov, the former director, was pointing to, we're going to go through a bump first. From now through like 2030 is going to be the first bump. Now, after that, I hadn't really gone too far out into it, but that's why I named my channel Adapt 2030, knowing this information back in 2014, that we were coming into this bump that would really start to occur now through 2030. And if we don't grow our crops in a different way, and if we don't restructure the way we do agriculture on the planet, there simply will not be 8 billion people here. I was doing my channel to try to get us to start the conversations, to have these talks that were difficult, and not blaming humankind for the changes we're seeing, that it's a cycle in the sun. But after watching this movie, The Great Taking, I really understand now that they understood that this was beginning. So they set the financial system to be able to confiscate assets at the time we're entering now for continuity of government, to claim or scrape or steal whatever they need to keep the world functioning after the reset, during the reset, and restart the economy after it. Now, keep in mind, this started in like 1967-ish. So what did they know in terms of science to get them to start to do the monetary shenanigans and juggling act to bring us out to this point, knowing that this point would arrive where everything would go to zero in terms of value, because a disrupted society from earthquakes and, tides 3 to 5 times higher than normal for weeks on end, and airlines grounded, and internet's going out, and electrical disruptions and power grids going down because of effects from the sun. You don't have a global economy anymore. You got a regional economy at best. And, sectors within that. So the Southeast U.S. might be not affected as the Northeast, because the Northeast has an enormous amount of, iron ore and different types of aluminum bauxite in the crust up there. So a lot of current, electrical current from the sun can hit our surface of the earth and run through that much more easily than a clay substrate, which would be the Southeast U.S. Down here, there's not so much what you consider large mining and refining and smelting. That's all Northeast stuff, Great Lakes, because that's where those deposits are. Down here, we got some coal seams, West Virginia, and then you get further south and it's clay. It just doesn't, and then you get down to Florida and it's corals and, different kind of alluvial floodplain kind of stuff. Nothing, current doesn't run through that so easily. So if you're talking about a full disruption, even in the United States, in Canada, like that whole Northeast Maritimes area that would be a taken offline area from a huge solar storm. But down in Florida and the Southeast U.S. might still have functional power with the hydroelectric dams, got the ports and things. So it would be its own economy, although parts of the economy in the U.S. would collapse. So you look at this whole thing in hindsight here in a much larger, wider picture. People know, and somebody always knows something. And Douglas Vogt was one of those guys. Something inbound right now, and they are racing. And when I say they, I'm talking about anything involved in continuity of government or government to keep itself intact, especially using AI. is now running full steam ahead to try to beat this timeline of whatever the sun's throwing at us. And who knows, if I was living 6,000 years ago and a million bison would always move from west to east through this valley, and then the following year they moved north to south across ridges, and our hunting parties were like, whoa, what the heck just happened? You'd have probably noticed that and noted it as something so strange that the buffalo changed their orientation. You got to look through history and myth and legend to find these types of things. So what if the winds were blowing different? Would that not establish new trade routes? Would that not stop old empires from having their same, war path or traditional economic corridors? Of course it would. So anyway, Ransom, I mean, there's a lot of just similarities across time here is what I'm saying. And it just seems we're back at it again. The clock's about to strike midnight once more.
Yeah, and the weapon that will be used, like in all wars, will be food. This is how you're going to, people that say they're not going to deal with some of these things that are happening, but at the same time, they don't grow their own food and they don't know anybody who does. So it's hard for me to believe, a lot of people, like, they make comments about these things. So right here, I'm looking at Tech Times. Cali Express, world's first automated AI-powered restaurant, is set to open in Southern California. This establishment will deploy cutting-edge food tech, automating both grill and fry stations. But even better than that,
printed
when
food,
you scan down
dude.
here, yeah, even better than that, though, it's a technology firm streamlining order and payments through biometrics. So there's the key right there. Whenever all of the box food chain, mega billion, international, et cetera, excuse me, I had a viewer get mad because my slang talk, et cetera, these different companies are going to only take biometrics. They're going to stop taking cash. Matter of fact, if you've seen all of the videos across the internet about fast food places and the names that they're getting with the violence and the people flipping out. Ironically, this place is called Flippy, the company. But these people that are flipping out in the restaurants are making it where people don't want to go to the restaurant. They don't want to go to, Church's Chicken if there might be a riot just because someone didn't get extra sauce. Well, that's not going to happen in these places, which is coming fast. People keep thinking that it's not going to, but I'm telling you that it is. They are going to combine artificial intelligence and robotics. And just like this article says, they are going to automate both grilling and frying, which means all those teenagers that were crying about minimum wage, guess what? You got your minimum wage, but now you're not going to have a job because there is going to be what basically amounts to a smart building, a robotic building that just takes orders on the outside. It pushes meals through a little, what do they call those? A little kiosk booth, right? And you're going to go in there and it's going to only take your order with your biometrics. That means if you don't have biometrics or you're not part of the system or your credit score is bad or maybe this company don't like your politics, you're not going to get to eat there. And this is going to spread because it's easy, it's convenient. For the mega billionaires, for the transhumanists, and for the people that like to design everything that is about America. They've taken all of the best things. Like, you could just look at this picture because I'm not going to lie. That picture looks like some tasty golden fries and a juicy cheeseburger. But what if the companies decide, they're going to go along with the WEF and decide that people eat too much meat and we're just going to put beyond belief burgers in there. And then that's all that there is. And then you go to Walmart, Lowe's, or whatever your local chain is, which probably is not a local chain and just is advertising because they know people like local chains. So that's another thing that's going on is the conglomerates are buying everything. Everything's being bought. And I wanted to kind of connect this to because I have not seen the film you're talking about. I was looking a little bit about the books for the book of it. I was going to get a PDF of it. What was it called again? The Great Taking?
The Great Taking. I have the PDF. I'll be happy to send it to you.
Right. So, and this is before I've read anything. My idea, what I think it's already about, is the multinational banking cartels joined up with the realtor companies that basically own those companies, the finance companies, and everything in between. And, you know, I've talked about this before. At some point, they will own every single piece of property that there is to own under the system that allows them to do that. And that is what our system does. And that's why we sell to the Chinese. We sell anybody land here. And eventually, the people that own properties, private properties, are going to be outnumbered until there's going to be a form of eminent domain by the companies, banks, and government, where there just will be no private land. And isn't that not the phrase that they're telling you? You will own nothing and you will be happy. You'll be happy because they're going to put you in a little tiny home and you can watch Netflix and, you can have your robot food delivered to you by a robot, made by a robot, and charged by a robot. And then at some point, you have to wonder, why do they even need the populace of people that can't do anything in this new world? Because you're going to have to be something spectacular. You're going to have to be a great mind to be able to navigate a new world that's completely run by AI in all aspects of it, from hiring to firing, all the way to healthcare. Who lives, who dies, whose medication is affordable, whose isn't. And we already see that they've already tried to do this once here. We had the Watson computer that's deciding what, things happen to veterans, what kind of treatments they get. So basically, it's deciding who lives and dies. And then you have these countries popping up, those almost socialist countries in Europe and north of us. I'm not going to name names, but all of those same countries are starting to provide ways for you to eliminate yourself from the formula. So Bill Gates and all of these guys have that formula. You know, you're the P, you're the populace, you're the net zero. They want to get down to, you're the carbon they want to remove. You are the problem. And then it makes you wonder, are we only really talking about a small group of human capitulators? And if so, who are they capitulating with and for what end? Because like I said, all of it seems to be anti-human. Now, I am not going to participate in this, even though it sounds tasty and convenient. And I know that it's going to spread. It's going to be lots of robots. If you remember, McDonald's also has been opening up these things. This is going to be the next phase of things. You remember when Redbox came out? I think it was called Redbox, and then Netflix after that. People thought that was funny. People laughed at that idea, but that became the future. Redbox became the idea. Then Netflix started doing it. I might have got those backwards, but either way, the little boxes on the corner that would sell you the movies, so you didn't have to go to the movie store. It seemed novelty, but now we're way in the future where there's not even one of those places. I mean, there might be a few still left, but nobody really watches DVDs. The companies know that DVDs are no longer in their interest, because they want to meter the entertainment now. So you have to have a subscription to get access to what you previously would go buy and own for yourself and have it at home. They didn't like that idea, because that, again, is private ownership, allows you to do what you want with it. So they don't do that. And, they have that thing called the Disney Vault, meaning like if you don't own a copy of some specific movies or shows that they made, you can't get access to it on the internet. You can't download it, or not legally anyway, download it or find it. And they don't offer it on their streaming services. So everything from entertainment to food, even water, air, because, they're pushing that breathing is bad, is going to be metered by an AI, period. Now, who controls that AI, who programs that AI, and who ultimately benefits from that AI is still, in my opinion, undetermined. I mean, I don't know.
I'm going to say I still love Thailand because you can get a CD and they have a catalog of like 25, 30,000 movies, and you have to pay 25 cents per movie, and they'll burn it onto a CD for you. You can get multiple movies on each individual CD, and they still do that. Go to Khao San Road or anywhere close to there, and you can still get 25-cent movies burned down to your CD. And I always spend $20, $30 on that. Come home with a few hundred movies, least that was what I used to do. Wink, wink. There's still ways to get hard copies of movies, but you got to travel to different countries to be able to get that sort of thing. And if I could maybe jump in for a second, the metering thing kind of irks me too, because I grew up in the day where you bought Photoshop and it was Photoshop. It was on your computer. Now everything's metered. They even want you to meter like the Windows program so you can get your Excel and your Microsoft Word. But they want you to meter it and they want you to store everything in the cloud. So whatever you write is there for everybody to see. And the minute you don't pay your bill, it's all gone. Like it's just a really great way to erase a ton of information, because think about, there's been more information and documents and words and things created in the last, since, let's say, the 1990s than all of human history combined. So a record of our civilization, if you were going to do a reset and if you wanted to destroy history, before we had to do it through world wars and bomb everything like Dresden, for example, or rip apart Europe, crack the statues, break the statues, take it down, break it to rubble to rebuild roads and, cornerstones of things of airports, and bulldoze and bury heavy earthworks projects to remove the old world. Take down the antennas that harvested ether energy. The Tartarian complexes in the world that we used to enjoy, airships that would be traveling around the planet. And I'm talking about helium-powered airships, well, blimps or Hindenburgs, what you might call them. That was the way for travel. That world's been destroyed, completely gutted, and nothing remains. Barely anything remains except photos. And you have to know what you're looking for. And once somebody comes out clean and shows what those photos entail, then a lot of times those archival image sets will be removed. Now, hopefully you had stored those yourself, but, it's like anything else. How long does digitized information last? Because I have a personal story. I have had this little, hard drive, micro drive, 32 megabytes for, no, it's 32 GB, my bad. 32 gigs for quite some time. Try to plug it in the last few days and get some files off of it. It said it's corrupted. Well, how did it just suddenly corrupt itself? I didn't corrupt it. So then I had to get everything off slowly, copy paste. It wouldn't let you take the whole folder out. So you had to scrape the contents of the folder and then copy those and paste it, and then eventually delete the file and then copy and paste everything back onto a different file and then delete it, and eventually reformat the disk. And now it works again. But things go wrong all the time with hard drives. Anybody out there who knows what I mean? Like, how long will this information really last in terms of our world? And if everything's on the cloud, that's on a subscription model, it's very easy to disappear it. So imagine if I was studying ancient history and I had like 20,000 photos and I didn't pay my subscription and those 20,000 photos just disappeared off the cloud. No way to get them back. As far as I know, there's no way to reactivate your account a year or two later and be like, hey, give me my images back. They deleted that it's stored somewhere in perpetuity. But for you, they're like, oh, no, we deleted it all. It's all gone. Sorry, start over again. Which brings me to the great Taking movie. And I can sum it up for anybody out there that doesn't want to spend the hour and 20 minutes to watch it. Again, I'm still in the process of watching it and taking notes. The premise is super simple. Think about the monetary asset back in the 1930s backing everything on our planet, including, I'll be U.S. specific here, was gold. Like the entire monetary system on monetary assets, everything was backed by gold in the 1930s. Then May 1933, the Fed made it illegal to hold gold because they said the citizens were hoarding gold. So they confiscated it, and then the Fed hoarded all the gold, but they kept monetary conditions tight. So nothing really expanded even for like 5 years after that. Finally, we get into World War II, they relinquished some of that. So keep that in mind for a second. The monetary asset backing everything was gold. But today, securities globally are the assets backing everything. So if they're going to confiscate something to save this, they call it systemically vital institutions, the too big to fails, like the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, these sort of thing, Wells Fargos, they will have to remain intact. So they're going to be able to bail in and take every asset under ownership, so then they can restart the economy again. Like, how are we supposed to restart the economy if they aren't protected? And that's really what it boils down to. And the whole part of that is going into the case law that allows banks to confiscate assets to prevent them from failing. And that's pretty much the way it sums up, but it's just so much information on how the securities globally, what that entails with derivatives and the assets backing everything. Literally, you own nothing that's not a derivative somewhere that has been derivatized some way, shape, or form. If you hold a mortgage on your automobile, you hold a car payment, if you own or hold a mortgage on your home, it has been derivatized, slashed 1,000 ways from Sunday, and resold out there into this market. Now, all of that is going to be confiscated and wrapped under a few umbrella, too big to fail banks / systemically vital institutions legally. You'll have no recourse. And that's the whole thing the movie talks about is we still have legal recourse possibly to push back. And it's the only way to push back is if we all move in unison right now as a school of fish and demand that courts take these cases up, that these banks and institutions cannot hold your loan and confiscate it along with the property and the value of inflated values to try to inflate their balance sheet so they don't go insolvent. The last course of action here, and this is all going to be happening, in 2024. So if you will know, you own nothing because legally you won't hold title to it. Now, getting you out of your house door to door is going to be a whole nother animal. And that was another thing they talked about is controlling the aggression and the anger of the people. And the only way it can do that during a global collapse scenario is subjugate the population to maintain control until the new cycle begins again. Now, that subjugation during World War II was how long? 8 years, 12 years some places, 6 years other places. But this one is something special. This is the reset to reset the entire system on a multi-thousand-year reset. This reset, as was explained, was no different than the Roman era reset of the planet at that time. So whatever went on with the electromagnetic frequency changes that definitely tweaked the Roman, say, behemoth that was, could no longer support his people, could not grow enough food, they debased the currency, it comes back down to it. But there was a massive reset on purpose at that point as well. So we are coming back into a 1,500 year at the minimum financial reset to, when I say this, take the system to zero and start it over again with central bank digital currencies, because at that point, since they own your house, you'll have no equity in it. You can't get a loan against anything. All the money will have been taken away out of the system. Even if you had a bank account, the laws that were passed in 2008, you're just a creditor to the bank. That's it. You will have no money or access to monies. They can easily roll out a central bank digital currency because it'll be tied to the app, which they will initially put money into it to allow you to buy food. But that money is not free money. It was not your previous money. That is newly created, uploaded money that you are now paying interest on. Now, the interest rate being determined, or what the interest rate will be set at as that new central bank digital currency unveils and your starving family needs to feed itself, is unknown. And you will do anything to keep yourself alive for food or your family alive. So you will accept that central bank digital currency and you will accept the money they gave you. It's not free, and you will pay the interest rate, and you will not own a single asset as long as you own a mortgage on it or a note on it or a dollar on it. This was another scary point too, was if you even own $1 on your house and you're at the very last payment and you still own one single dollar on it, and this financial reset happens, they will confiscate your house because you owed a dollar on it. Although you paid 30 years and you were at your very last one payment, and if you cannot get that paper that says you own it, and here's where the letter of the law gets kind of gray. because I will encourage anybody out there to take a look. If you've paid off your home, take a look at your note and see if it says renter or if it says owner on it. Because even if you paid off your home, you are still considered a renter, because the country, the sovereign wealth funds, and the crown still owns your property. You're still a renter even though you paid it off. So under the letter of the law, in the gray area, even if your home's paid off, they still can confiscate it. They can still take it under the reset to bail it in as an asset. They are literally planning to confiscate all collateral on the planet, all of it, which makes gold and silver outside the system quite a good bet. So, try to sum that up there. It might be a little much for people, but Ransom, I think you're smart enough to understand that. And, this changes in the Universal Commercial Code in 1994. Here was another important point that was pulled out. Secured creditors are legally allowed to take all client assets. And they call this a securities entitlement. They couldn't get it through the entire governmental system on the national level, so they had to go state by state by state by state. And all 50 states now adhere to the same principles, but they started in 1994. And this is the only thing that currently can be challenged in court. It's meant to subvert local laws. So unless your sheriff says, no, I will not oblige and remove these people from their homes, that's why there's been such a push to install certain mentalities in these offices and oaths of judges and sheriffs. Because when it comes to this point and the banks say, well, we took all the collateral, we took all assets, we took all monies, now you have to leave your home because you don't actually own it any longer. There's a huge amount of sheriffs, an enormous amount of sheriffs across the United States that'll say, yep, I'm here with my deputies, y'all need to leave. But then there's other places that they're going to not adhere to that. So what are they going to do? Bring in United Nations troops to try to clear homes? Then what? Well, the then what is they want to get you back to the subscription model, where the roundabout way seems going to be something like this. They're going to confiscate all the assets, take it down to zero, introduce a central bank digital currency, and you'll have to rent back your home again in perpetuity. You'll never own it. You'll have to rent your home on a subscription model, which means it can never be passed down to your children. It could be not bought or sold for a profit. You will be on a permanent, what do they call those, company town model, from your birth to your grave, at least for the newest babies born today. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, that's a little grandiose for their entire plan, but how close, Ransom, do you think we are? Like, explaining that as the grand plan, like how far are we into it and how much will AI help them facilitate that and really come to the end goal is more my question to you.
Well, simply put, AI can tell bankers and these different people exactly who is most likely to lose their funds. So when you look at headlines like this, so I'm sure there's AI programs right now being used to figure out which properties are going to come up, next available, who's going to forfeit their mortgages, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure there's programs written for all of that. I wouldn't doubt that at all right now. But when you read like headlines like this, okay, here's one, just to put the pieces together. Home prices are up in all major U.S. cities except for one, that's Austin. Housing market has whiplash, says economist. It seems like they've been pushing the price unreasonably up in real estate and prices for food and taxes and gasoline and et cetera, all the things that a household needs to run. And they've been pushing that through the ceiling, which are going to force millions of people, obviously. And we talked about this years ago. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I was talking about how I had already noticed that there were more houses up for sale or up for lease from realtors than there were from private owners trying to sell it or people that actually own their home, at least in the area that I live in. Now, I do live in what's considered one of the lowest in the nation. Our state's last in everything, like from education to income. It's pretty high in crime, border crossings and abortions and things like that, if they're proud about that. But like I said, the whole system is moving to destroy the idea of a household or a nuclear family. And one aspect of that is making sure that no one owns anything. How are you supposed to have a family if you don't have a place to put the family, a place for your family to grow up, a place for your family to learn skills? That's a world that's gone. And I know you remember this, all the way up probably until the early 90s. All across America and the world, there were kids that had, little hobbies, projects. A lot of those kids became entrepreneurs later, became millionaires because there was a space and an environment that allowed children to, do all kinds of things. I remember when I was a kid, I would go to different kids' houses all the time, and they were into different things, modeling or guns or whatever it was. And, they had magazines to order these things from that were companies from all across the U.S. making little things. Now, none of that exists anymore. Everything is mass produced. It's made to fall apart. It has no real purpose or, substance to anything anymore. And then when you look at this, here's one of the headlines I was looking at today. This is off the charts. Economist claims 2024 will bring biggest crash of our lifetimes to the U.S., which is, who knows? That could be exactly what's going to happen. And then, all of these people with the checks that they get from the government, which is about to increase when more and more people become homeless, they start trying to use the resources that are available. And once those close down, and it's more of a centralized thing, and it makes you wonder, maybe the world elite are just really nice people, and they know that we're about to have a worldwide food shortage, and that's why they sent all the extra men up to the northern countries. So, it would soften the brunt of the starvation because they would be in countries that had a little extra or, a little bit more resources. Does that make sense? I don't think so. It seems like
no, it was to try to move 10 million man standing army when they moved down there to set those areas up as a new growing region on the planet.
Right, which kind of moves to that same idea. All of those people would have been potential people that would be fighting for the outcome of their local area if they had stayed in those countries. Not to mention that all the military-age men leaving those countries leaves them lacking a workforce, things like that. You ever wonder about that? Matter of fact, there's a guy that does a whole thing about the population, and he talks about, even if you took anybody, what happens is the people with a little bit more resources tend to be the ones that migrate out. And the way we used to do it on a merit-based system, you kind of had to be, something in a field or have some kind of addition to our civilization before, the concept of letting you in, which would take the best people out of those third world countries, leaving them with even less resources and nobody to, innovate, build, and do things there. So what they're doing now, it seems like, is emptying an entire portion of the world, then letting it to descend into chaos, war, and starvation. And it's ripe for the taking. Not to use Israel and Gaza as an example, but think about that. That's a classic pincer attack that has lasted for decades, ever since, the Golan Heights and stuff happened. This pincer attack's been happening. And what did they do with the people inside of it? You could agree or disagree on the purpose or the reasoning behind some of the things that all of the people do on both sides. But what's clear for me, being out of it from a third point of view and looking at it, I see a massively more equipped, more financed military in a decades-long pincer attack where they cut off the water, food, resources to that area, and now they're being moved. And those are people that, guess what? They own nothing, but they're not that happy. They're having to move. And basically, if you look at the Western world as a whole, the same thing is being done to the Western world, that's being pushed in on by all directions by millions and millions of migrants into places that can't pay for it. Basically, they don't have the resources there. So what's going to happen there is slowly the same resources disappear, leaving large populations and population centers. And the end result of those cities you see in the Middle East, they're all crumbling. They're dust. I mean, look at Iraq, look at Iran. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they had what was looking like some of the best countries in the world coming up. They were about to be like everyone else in first world. They had lots of good things about their countries, and now when you look at it after the Western powers got involved, it's not quite the same. But I think it's our turn. And it's pretty obvious that they're turning it on us.
We'll be right back after this short break to continue our conversation. Who's next on the planet, and how can we get around this, survive, and thrive during
times of both prosperity and disparity? Through the rise and fall of great dynasties and civilizations, gold has maintained its purchasing power as a reliable store of value for millennia. Gold has been used as money since 560 BC, when King Croesus of Lydia created a gold coin in his own image. Ever since, it has continued to increase its long-term value and remains the world's most universally accepted form of money. Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422. Or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Want painting depicts one of the most peaceful scenes in American life as a family gathers around a holiday dinner table to give thanks, eat, talk, laugh, and share in an abundance of blessings. While this great American tradition will play out in the coming weeks, a hunger catastrophe is unfolding around the world, putting even the simplest of meals out of reach for a growing number of individuals and families around the world. Right now, nearly 1/3 of the world is food insecure, with over 828 million people going to bed hungry each night. 149 million children experience stunted growth and development due to a chronic lack of essential nutrients. As many as 50 million people in 45 countries are at immediate risk of famine, and more than 45 million children suffer from acute malnutrition or wasting, a devastating condition where a child's body is so starved of nutrients it begins to consume itself. These numbers are staggering, and behind every one of them is a real person. More than 44 million people in the U.S. face hunger, including 1 in 5 children. Millions of people in the U.S. don't have enough food to eat or don't have access to healthy food. This is a big problem, but together we can solve it. Although it isn't always obvious who is going without food or facing food insecurity, it might be your friend, your grandparents, or a coworker who is struggling to put food on the table. It could be a neighbor, the friendly elderly couple down the street. Maybe it's a single dad or mom who might need help. We all have tough times. That's why investing in emergency food storage is a must for you and your family's long-term safety net, but it can also be a life-saving gift. So in this giving season, you could help others by providing a helping hand to those in need of a little extra to make it through. As we always say, those who know what's coming are using today to prepare. American families are preparing. Folks are investing in emergency food storage. And you should be too, and you can start today with ADAPT 2030. Right now you can save $200 on a 3-month emergency food supply for yourself, or even better, for someone in need. Make this holiday season truly a happy one. My Patriot Supply, the country's largest preparedness company, is more than equipped to stock your shelves. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. That's 25 years of security. Just think about that. Almost nothing out there other than gold and guns that will maintain not only value but usefulness and security. And right now, it's $200 off. Get over 2,000 calories every day. Just add water and heat, then eat. Make sure every member of your family has a 3-month food kit from My Patriot Supply.
Radio for letting us have these conversations. And if anybody else feels it's of value, consider a donation right here, Revolution Radio. They even got the QR code so you can donate crypto right now as one of the options. If you're feeling generous in the holiday season. And for Ransom Godwin and myself, we have the show notes over at oilseedcrops.org. Right on the top nav bar, click that. We'll send you the show notes, MIAC radio show. Trying to put out the ideas that we talk about. So again, it is truly about having the conversation, expanding it, starting that conversation with others who might not be, aware of it, and coming at with facts so you can, show them, hey, this is actually true. So while Ransom was on the break here, and along with myself, I pulled up the Hal Turner radio show. He had an experience, because before we went on the break, we were talking about you're going to own nothing and how this great reset and the great taking is in play. So I found this article real interesting. I read it last night, and I'll just start this second hour with it. And if any of you who have had the same experience would love to let us know here in the comments next to the video. If you're watching us live tonight on Rumble, the Adapt 2030 channel, or on Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel on YouTube, wherever you are tonight, right here on Revolution Radio or on Vigilante TV, shout out. Wherever we sit in this universe, listening above planet listeners, thank you. On the space station, shout out to Kim. So what we're looking at right now, so Hal Turner, he runs a site, he runs a radio show also, and he went to the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission to transfer 2 different titles. He bought these used cars. So he bought them at an auction sale where they repossess automobiles, and the bank had called in the title or the lien on it, and you go pay that off, and he went to auto auctions. He makes a little extra money doing this. So he had 2 vehicles that he needed to get the titles transferred over to after buying them at auction, after they'd been repossessed from the bank. So obviously there's a lien on the automobile. So he goes in there, and he goes to the first counter, and he says, I'm here, I got these 2 titles, I got them at the auction. I'd like to have the lien holder removed, and I want you to issue me a new title, freehold, that I own the automobile. And the one guy at the counter says, oh, how about if I save you $60 each on those liens, and I'll just remove it off the computer system, and you'll be we'll just remove the old lien holder off the computer. How about that? And we'll save you $60. We'll give you back the same lien, the same title, but in our computer system here, we've removed that. And he says, his spidey sense started to turn. He goes, nah, I think I'll pass. I want to get the title reissued with just my name with no lien holder. So then he goes to a second room in a different part of the building. And the next woman that he talks to says the same exact thing. And then because he said, I don't care about the money, I just want you to reissue my loan or reissue my titles. And the woman behind the counter got all snotty and goes, oh, aren't you a rich guy? You don't even care about the money. We're just trying to save you money. and like trying to get real snotty with him. And the same guy did the same thing, like, oh, we're just trying to save you money, buddy. And it seemed it happened twice. So at the end there, in his story, it's like, you can't remove it, because he was watching the woman put in the I don't know, whatever he had to do the process inside the computer system, and it wouldn't actually process the removal unless a payment had been made. So then his whole thing on the bottom there was, this goes right into the, you'll own nothing, is if he didn't have the reissued titles without the lien holder information on them as clear freehold titles, the lien would still be on the paperwork, and they would just come and confiscate the automobiles again. So how does this go through with your house? If you paid off your house, how quickly can you get that piece of paper that said I paid it off? Well, that only protects you one step from the Commonwealth, still from the Bank of England that controls the monetary system here, that supposedly in the letter of the Gray Law lists you as a renter in your own property even after you've paid off your mortgage in full. You are not the owner. You are the renter, the tenant. It depends on where you're at in the country, whether it lists you as renter or tenant. And you're not the owner. So then you go into, and you can go further back in time and go into the early 1800s and see if the land was bequeathed for you. You can do a land title on that sort of thing. But in Tennessee, unfortunately, they don't have land titles. Other countries do, or excuse me, other counties do. In other places like Arizona, you can get a land title, land patent. Those things were given back there more in the West than they were in the East. But it never stops, man. Ransom, and I look at this and I say, state motor vehicle in New Jersey trying to pull this. Is it happening in other states too? Like, if anybody's experienced this, I would love to know if this is a thing or if it's just in New Jersey, because it sounds like they're trying to scam people and everybody's in on the scam.
That's kind of funny, because I used to do that for a living as well, is get cars from the insurance auto auctions. And there is all kinds of scams going on in the entire racket, from one end to the other, from the, transportation of the vehicle where theft occurs, where they'll take parts off of and things like that, all the way to the fact that the insurance companies themselves are purposely trashing titles so that they never have to pay off on the same vehicle again. Even though the car is not damaged beyond repair and it doesn't cost much to repair it, the insurance company will total it. And that way they give the customer a less than the value price for it when they pay the car, and then they take the car. Then they resell the car for a higher amount because of supply and demand, a higher amount than the bank paid the customer for the car. And someone else will buy that. And yes, depending on where you're at, you will get either a clean title, a salvage title, depending on the insurance company. They're the final deciding factor on whether or not a title gets salvaged or not. So once they mark it, it's a salvage title forever. And in that way, insurance companies can also not insure it. So you can have a car that is totally sound, and, they will not insure it. But at the same time, other cars that get banged up and smashed, frame damage and stuff, can have a clear title and can be insured. So the whole racket is it's really messed up because there's scams going on. So even at the auto auction lot, they have, I don't know how to say it. They pick preferred buyers that go to dealerships. So there's all of these kickbacks going back. There's theft going on. And then not to mention the evil scheme by the insurance companies to devalue your property in the first place by marking it salvage when they know it's not. And for example, you could run into something with a brand new car and maybe break a headlight, the grill, and it's not a frame. It's the other part of the frame that goes around, like the radiator and stuff. Now, if any of that's bent, they'll total the car. They'll just say it's they don't want to pay on it. And it's not because they don't want to pay the damage now. They don't want to pay on the car ever again, and they get to sell it twice. So that they sell it to the insurance auto auction. Then the next time when someone buys it, they have to pay on it again. Whether or not they can have, and it depends on which state. Like I said, some states will not even allow you to drive a salvage car on the highway. But there's a whole racket. And then when you're adding in this idea that the car will maintain the debt on it from the previous owners, which is not that far-fetched. So because actually with my property here, the utility companies tried to arrange to force me to pay a previous resident's bills in order to get my utilities turned on. In other words, they were trying to bill me for someone else and then trying to tell me that I couldn't have services unless I paid someone else's bill that used to live at the same address. And I had to fight that I think it was at least 6 months before they finally decided that they were not going to try to do that, because I'm pretty sure that that's illegal to carry over debt on not only property, but on people. Like, so other people's debt, you can't put that on someone else. But they try to do that. And I would not put it past the companies at all to try to push debt on payments on over, because, there's a whole repo thing out there that cars get stolen that I'm going to say stolen because they don't actually owe money on it. And if you remember, I forgot which year that was. I think it was like 2018. They had several kind of precedent cases where banks took homes that they didn't even have a mortgage on, and the people had the deed, showed up in court, and the bank still, in the end, won and took control of the property. So this, the whole idea of property tax to begin with, tells you that you don't own anything. And then if you live in a municipality or anything like that, there's rules, regulations. You may or may not live in an area that some homeowner association feels they have power over you. And then they can use things like that to take property, forfeit property, put bills and liens on property. The whole system is crazy. And no, you never own anything. And if you don't believe me, fail to pay your property tax a couple years in a row and see what happens. I mean, some counties are nice and they'll bill it because it's in their interest to bill it until it gets to an amount that you might not be able to pay right away. And then guess what? Your land's gone. It's not yours anymore, because it never was.
Yeah, here where I live, they give you a full 2 years of past due payments, but when it comes to the third year, finally they will do something about it. So you look at that and you go, all right, you got 36 months, and it depends on how much your taxes are. And if it's under $5,000, they won't close on it. So that could, if your property tax is only $1,000, that could still give you 5 years before they'd even initiate anything. And then they would try to contact you. And see, Tennessee is still old school like that. It's not like California. Oh, one day late and we're going to take your house. So it depends on what county you live in. I'm in an old school county where things move slow still. And that's a benefit. Sheriff is very constitutional minded, and from what I've heard stories, he's told others to take a beating, take a pound on the street. Bye-bye. We're not going to do that here in this county. That's outside our your jurisdiction to do that here. So seems still pretty up and up. But when it comes down to people getting hungry or people moving to another side because they have to choose sides, that's what gets scary. Is the way I'm reading into this is you're going to have to choose a side. There's going to be no neutrality. You'll either be with it or you'll be against it, and there will be no medium in between. And this is where the world gets kind of weird, is when you have to choose that side. Although, we've seen it through many a chapter of history. Pacifists had to choose where they're going to sit on the line. And I hate to be drug into that situation, because they always say the simplest of people become the angriest of men during these times, because they just want to be left alone. And when you drag them into something, they become like extremophiles on the other side of things. And you hear about this time and time again. leave me alone. Hey, I don't want this, just quit pushing, quit progging. But once they get fired up or get angry, then they become the craziest of the crazies. And that's about as PG as I can say it here on the show. But where does it take us with just simple debt? Because I pulled up this article here off of Zero Hedge today. And what they're offering is buy now, pay later at 4,500 new Walmart self-pay checkout kiosks. So this buy now, pay later phenomenon, welcome to the loan sharks. I think it's like 28% interest on that. Like, what kind of world are we living in where 54% of the United States retail buyer is now on a buy now, pay later? Now, I get it for holidays because, man, everybody's back's against the wall and you just expected to get stuff, and they've turned every day into a holiday, and it's just a ridiculous show of things. I get it. I understand around Christmas to do that. But to buy food on a buy now, pay later type of thing for food, what? Up to 24 months. Now, some stores, and Walmart does not let you buy food on a buy now, pay later, but a plethora of other stores do allow you groceries, buy now, pay later. Now, I get it. If you're going to buy like a nice bicycle for your kids, for Christmas, and it's several $100s, and you decide you want to buy now, pay later. Okay, I'll do it in 2 payments, 4 payments, whatever. But to buy groceries on a buy now, pay later, we have definitely lost our country at that point. The economy of this country is so bad that you're forcing people to take monthly installments at 28% to buy their food. Now, that's truly unacceptable. And it's this group called Affirm, AFFIRM. And, I'm all about, they used to call it layaway, where you'd put a little percentage down and they would hold the good for you. I remember those layaway days back, umpteen years ago. And Christmas purchases, you might want to get a few things and several $1,000s of it during Christmas. Okay. But just for your everyday living, like in the middle of March, where you need to get your groceries on buy now, pay later, that's a little extreme for me. And if they're saying that 54% of all Americans out there buying are now on a buy now, pay later option, something's gone terribly wrong in our economy. So, breaking it into 2 halves. Yeah, Christmas buying and all this expensive things at this time. Yeah, okay. But in the middle of your daily living after that, it just doesn't make sense for the other 11 months of the year. But if we're down to this point, then what happens when the economy really falls? Because as was explained in the movie, let me find another note here. I had some numbers for you. Oh, okay. They're predicting that at the apex of where everything has been, and they talk about the 1930s, and they talked about a few other countries, we are going to go from where we sit now to 10% of that value on all of the indices or the markets. So the Dow Jones Industrial, the NASDAQ. So if it's at 4,800 right now, it's going to crash down to 480. That's the type of reduction they're talking about. And at the Dow Jones sitting, let's say even 30,000, it's going to crash to 3,000. This is the type of crash they're talking about. So envision me this crash, and 54% of Americans are already on a buy now, pay later for everyday items and food. And we go to this 10% reduction, 90% reduction in all stocks, bonds, real estate, mutual funds, housing prices. That at that point, there's going to be some sort of revolution in the country. They are going to absolutely go after the bankers at that point. But the whole thing about this, and that last little bit that I thought was the most important part of it, was subjugation. The only way they can get through and reset the system because of the angst and the anger will be to subjugate the population to maintain control until the new cycle begins. So for me, they're expecting it. They're baking it into the cake that the violence will be there because of the crash in the economy, because conditions are so rough already that most people are living paycheck to paycheck. That they're baking it into the cake that the violence will occur, so then the response will be more thuggery, more subjugation, more control, and digital IDs if you want to eat. And that's a world none of us need to be heading for. Really not. It needs to stop right here. The buck needs to stop immediately right this second right here. And we need to figure a way out that we can either take this to courts for litigation to try to overturn some of these rulings previously, or do something and set up new court hearings to try to start new whatever ways to nullify this or overturn it. Because if it doesn't, it's going to get real nasty. And again, we don't need nasty. We need a polite society where everybody can live in abundance and grow and follow your dreams and achieve whatever you want to. We don't need to be fighting for dailies. That's third world nation stuff in a failing state like Somalia was in the 1990s. That's what envisioned when I read and put all this together is coming to America is Somalia in 1990 with the Black Hawk Down. That's going to be your American cities. And that's no good for anybody. Now, Ransom, I'm sure you might agree with that. But yeah, I'm sure you got something to add into that.
Well, I would, but I sold my soul to the company store, and I'm waiting. I got, a Thanksgiving turkey on layaway for next year with the blue light special from Kmart. I could pay now, eat later, maybe pay some other time. No, I'm just kidding. That whole thing is a nightmare. And you imagine, people used to talk about that owning their soul to the company store because everything that they owned, they had to buy from the company store on borrowing because the store didn't pay enough to actually, pay the person that worked there. That's a horrible thing. And imagine that now tied to your behavior in a social credit score system where you have to do the right things in society to even have the credits available to buy food right now, or imagine, because everybody who has a credit card is already transitioned to this lifestyle of owing it later. You're going to buy it now, you're going to owe it later, and you've seen the headlines. More people are not able to pay off their credit. More and more bankruptcies of people that are trying to have a fresh start. I've always had that rule because I was raised that way, is usually for the most part, you don't buy things if you don't already, you can pay for it now. And paying for it now has its advantages, obviously, of owning things. And they don't want you to do that. And I kind of wanted to go back to, car manufacturing. It sounds kind of unrelated, but it's not.
No, it's totally.
Do you really own?
Yeah, man, you're reading my mind. Go.
Right, because you get a car, and the way it's set up now, a long time ago, people buy a car, they outright owned it, they could sell it to anybody, et cetera, et cetera. They could work on it, they could, transform it into a new car. They could do whatever they want. But in the last, I'm going to say 20 years of manufacturing, they've changed this where, parts are within parts, and you can't go buy that part at the store. And actually, I started seeing this roll out with the Korean-made cars first, but then even the Japanese and American cars started going over to this system of parts that you can't repair. You have to buy a whole section of the car, and it's unbelievably expensive once you break something like that. And then you got the electric car, right? Because the batteries, once they're out, you might as well buy a new car. It's a disposable car. It's a car that you didn't even own. And then on top of that, they've added so much software and remote meddling with the car's, software that it uses to run, that they could turn your car off. And I remember when I saw the first guy where OnStar turned off his Escalade when the police were chasing him. I think it was in Arizona or California, like a decade or more ago. And we were all joking about that. Yeah, why would you want that? Yeah, it's roadside assistance until they lock you in your car. It's even worse now. They can just turn off your car. Say the bank decides that your payment's no good. or that it's no longer going to allow you to make payments. We see businesses not businesses, the banking system going in this direction of deplatforming people, debanking them, et cetera, changing the agreement that you made with them. And they know that every time they update their user agreement, that you're not going to pile through the fine print on there. You're just going to say, okay, because you need to live your daily life, and that's how things are. But they've done this to auto manufacturing where they control your car. They can program it. They can turn it off. They can do whatever they want for it. You can't even repair some stuff. And matter of fact, some of the systems are getting so far advanced that your local shade tree mechanic doesn't know what he's looking at when he opens up the hood there. No offense. But what he used to work on as a combustion engine is now a robot that has a combustion engine. And the further we go in the future, they don't even want you to own your own car in the first place. They want auto cars. They want auto cars because at that point, then they really have a control on everything. And I see not too long in the future where states are going to start trying to put bills on out there to try to pass that requires you to own extra insurance to drive your older car down the road because it doesn't have all of the safety protocols that are now mandatory in cars. And then not to mention the emissions standpoint of it, right? They increasingly add all of these parts that does things that you have to have or you can't pass inspection in the state you're at. Luckily, I live in a state that doesn't have that, so you could basically just roll with the open exhaust, and it tells you that right there, for example, we live in a super supposed green state, so it's only a matter of time before they throw that on there. But they haven't been worried about it so far. They haven't been worried about the atmosphere or the environment or none of that. Matter of fact, we get warnings of poor air quality really horribly because El Paso is to the south of us, and every once in a while you get a wind pattern that blows all of that junk up to where I live, and then it just sits there between the mountains. And you'll see this big giant red spot, like if you go to one of the sites out there that show you the weather and the air quality and precipitation. You look on the map and you see this giant red spot in the middle of New Mexico because they don't care about the environment, yet they're littering the land with these wind generators that break and get struck by lightning, and they're totally toxic. So you can imagine that not too long from now, the same greenies that put it up are going to be saying, hey, look, it's ruining the landscape. We need another $1 billion or $2 billion to dismantle and get rid of all this stuff now, right? Because it doesn't work. The electric car industry is going that way. And the problem that they're having is their electric technology just doesn't work right now because it's hard to get enough supplies to build enough batteries to make it cheap enough for you to buy a car and replace that battery when it inevitably goes bad due to cold weather or draining or some other kind of mishap. But the auto car idea doesn't require it to be electric car. People are kind of putting those together. They're not together. Your gasoline powered car is definitely increasingly being controlled by AI from how it runs to keeping records about where you go and what you say in your car. I'm not sure which show I talked about that on, but there's a case now about the rental cars recording all of your contacts and every text message that you sent and every phone call that you made, because in the user agreement, you agreed that you could do that. So when they get in the rental car or whatever, they plug in their stuff and they use all the fancy new technology, it literally taps into them and takes all of their information off of that. Now, you could see that expand to where you can't even rent a car. And if cars are so expensive that you can't even buy them as a regular Joe, you're going to try to use public transit, which everybody knows that's a nightmare. That has never worked anywhere except for in a few countries I could speak of where there's not much crime at all, like Japan. But then you see them cramming everybody into the mass transit. Obviously, it doesn't work that great because they would need cars to help with that instead of being packed in there. Can you imagine, just for a second, I'm pretty sure they have a really good safety record, but can you imagine a bullet train crashing because someone attacked it, hacked it, or did something to it, and the way that they cram the people on there? You imagine what kind of catastrophe and thing that would be. I don't think it's really going to happen in Japan because, just the way that they are, they really are about professionalism in the things they do. But take that to a different country and then start increasing the amounts of this public transportation. As we've seen all over the country, the old network of transportation, they don't even upkeep and it falls apart. How many train rails have you seen? Train derailments have you seen lately? How many toxic plants have gone up in smoke? And now, are these just a bunch of accidents, or is it the fact that no one in the government apparatus cares whether or not you own your property, live in a town, are connected to it? They don't care about that. They know that the entire system is designed to fail. And that's exactly why they're not upkeeping our power grid for any kind of mishap from the sun. They don't care. Their best interest and their money and their power all comes from rebuilding and offering new things so that people can be indebted to them, and not only a metering system, but just the fact that if they had it their way, there would be no access to any kind of modern civilization unless you play their game, unless you join into their matrix, accept the social engineering program, the credit score, and the entire digital platform that is now going to control everything from entertainment to property to finances, healthcare. All of it is all going that way. And then you have these two realities competing, right? And people can't put the pieces together because we're talking about this nightmare apocalyptic scenario of civilization fail, empire fail, which I think is inevitable and it's going to happen. But then simultaneously, we're talking about this futuristic technocratic world of the elite and the way that they want to micromanage every single creature on the planet, including me and you, track and trace and control from the top down. Well, it fits in perfectly to me because one happens first. They set the program up, then they pull the plug on the reset. Everything's off. Everybody goes crazy. Population reduces dramatically during this transition period. And then out on the other side, the saviors offer you what you used to have, which was civilization, running water, transportation, safety, some sort of peace, at least in an area. That's what they've taken away from you in this modern time, and that's what they're going to continue to take away until the masses beg for authoritarian control so that they could get back to the idea of this fake civilized world that they were trying to be included in, the one that cares about what the Hollywood elites think, and the one that thinks they need this new phone every year, or rims on their car, or the right music to play, or the right haircut. That's all part of the control mechanism to make sure that you are completely unconscious and fast asleep while they pull the plug on civilization and restart it in this nightmare idea that they have shaped, that they have designed. And when I say from the ground up, I mean it. They have technology to create new creatures, to control the food. I mean, even the people are subject to disappear because now they have the means to tinker with creation. So if they pulled the plug on everything, I think they would just roll out of their vaults with all their DNA and heirloom seeds that they had. With their continuity of government programs, they would have a complete workforce. They would have the technology of robotics, AI, et cetera, in their side. They would have stashed back many machines to get it accomplished. So they just roll out and they become the saviors of whoever's left, except for those pockets of people that already realized how to have a free and natural life on this earth by being a regular human and living in connection with the environment, meaning growing food, storing seeds, storing food, living like people used to live. There's going to be pockets of that, but I imagine that they will be deemed enemies of the new state.
Yeah, you kind of described what I would envision the world in 1895 to 1900. It seems like we're going through another reset because you describe, what was the freedom like of somebody living in the United States before the Federal Reserve, when money was value of gold and silver, and the open plains and open lands and the opportunities to start new worlds, new adventures, businesses. The world was completely open. They didn't even have passports back then. Suddenly, fast forward in 1913 and World War I, and the world was completely reset. So can you imagine we're repeating something very similar to what they would have also experienced. But that world, they took the incomplete, freedom away from the world and then reset it. Pain compliance. It's been done at least twice. Can you imagine being free and roaming around this planet from, say, 1900 to 1910, and then suddenly this new Federal Reserve thing, and then you have somebody else is controlling the money, and suddenly, in the first several years of this new money, you're getting, massive inflation. They tell us these stories about the Federal Reserve. Oh yeah, your dollar's worth like 1 cent of what it was in 1913, but there was massive inflation from, say, 1913 and 1920. It's like 15% inflation. So what kind of money did they steal, and what kind of livelihoods did they take away from? The magnates were coming in. The control of complete systems were being wrestled away from the individuals and companies, the individual companies and entrepreneurs of the time as well. These conglomerates. I mean, we have laws now so you can't, consolidate industry. But back then, that's exactly what happened. So go from a world completely free in the year 1900 into magnates resetting the entire economy and, behemoths of business, magnates controlling the oil industry, the steel industry, everything, pharmaceuticals coming all under one control system, all overseen by that same money system. That reset that occurred between 1895 and, say, 1913 was no different than we're living through right now. They offered him a different system. So somebody that would have had a time machine and come into our world right now would be like, that's insane, the amount of freedom you guys have lost completely in comparison. So, going through that pain compliance thing once again here, I mean, somebody in 100 years from now would look and go, oh, I can't believe, if we were to go to in the future in 100 years, we would look at that and say, oh, I can't believe how much freedom you lost. So this reset, for me, seems like it's an ongoing, continuous part of the planning from the Roman Empire. Bring it forward. It doesn't matter if it's Tang Dynasty in the year 800 in China. Things are reset continuously. Now, is it by man's fingers, or is it by the solar activity that man's fingers ride on top of? Because wherever you look around this planet, there is a fingerprint about every 400 years of reset across all continents, all cultures. You can't tell me that the entire world resets every 400 years. That's nonsensical. We're not even supposed to be connected at that point. 2 cycles ago, 800 years in the past, everything was supposed to be completely disconnected. Nothing was even discovered yet. America wasn't even discovered yet. So if you're telling me that the Mississippian cultures are supposed to reset at the same time as other cultures around Europe and Africa and Australia, it's an impossible story to believe. But if we move through timelines of what was considered drought or mega floods or something that prevented crop growth, that makes sense why there was a reset. But that wouldn't be from a government or an emperor or a king or a fiefdom. Nothing. That would be purely solar activity that drives everything we've seen through history and antiquity. Because you mentioned something about, I had this conversation last week with my brother-in-law. I was asking him, do you think car prices are coming down? Because I'm interested in getting a mini SUV. A little bit better on, gas mileage, and I wanted to get a used one. And I was wondering if used auto prices are coming down. And he looks at me, because he owns a business here in town. He's like, not a chance. I said, well, I thought the interest rates were coming down a little bit. And he goes, no, that they are, but it doesn't, it's counterintuitive. Automobile companies are manufacturing less automobiles, creating false scarcity. So they can now ask the full list price, which would always be discounted in the past. And Ransom, I'd like to hear your idea on full list price versus others. But since there's a scarcity of autos, now they're only running 2 shifts at some of these production lines. So now there's less cars. They can ask full list price for it, and they're getting it. So the automobile secondhand market isn't really declining as much as many had thought it would. And John Deere, you know, they're another one that's just terrible with you can only use their parts. You have to have it serviced if something breaks. And you've tried to repair even one screw on it that wasn't from the dealer, then your warranty's void. For me, that's cool. I'm driving around like a 0-point turn mower where I can fix things, change the battery. You know, I got one of my neighbors who's been a mechanic before. You know, a couple $1,000 0-point turn. Yeah, okay. I'll repair myself. I don't need their warranty. I'll just get somebody else to fix it. But a $500,000 or $400,000 piece of machinery in the fields, or even $250,000, something that's a harvester, a combine, or you got some, you know, that they're taking it back to the dealer every time. They have to. You're talking about $250,000 being void on any types of warranty if you even replaced a single screw, hose, or did an oil change on your own. That's ridiculous. And, you know, during the early days of the Ukraine war, when Russia was taking some of the John Deere tractors back, John Deere just turned them off. Like once they got back to Russia, they were unusable, except I understand Russia's pretty intelligent with the computer stuff. They probably took out what was, you know, turning off the ignition and the drivetrains, et cetera. I'm sure they removed all of that. But in the initial days, John Deere was able to disable all the farm machinery across Ukraine and turn it into a paperweight. Now think about that for a second. If you're talking about removing somebody and turning off because their social credit score is not where it should be and they're not abiding by this, that, or the other mandates, or they have not complying with what AI says they should, okay. But now bring it into a full country that is relying on, and I don't know if Macy Ferguson's doing the same thing or whatever, but John Deere can turn off an entire nation's farm equipment at a flick of a switch. Now you talk about control of the food supply. How many companies out there are running with this GPS on plowing? You're doing 1,000 acres. That's no different than dozers going in and being GPS, you know, locating, and especially with terrain grades. It's no different. Everything's gotten so high tech, especially GPS driven, and now integrating AI with the GPS so you can get an extra couple square feet out of your fields for highest yield on the GMOs. But to be able to turn off farm machinery anytime you want, I mean, that is the new play for war. And, you know, the tech, you know, you mentioned those bullet trains. I've been on a few bullet trains in my day. Flew into Tokyo one time and went out to Osaka. We were heading to Kyoto, and there's a bullet train from Kyoto to Osaka. Like, you're there in just seconds, you know. But it is super high class, very expensive tickets. But if you want to get somewhere fast, and it's hyper quiet, and man, you are smoking along the rails there. And I've also been on one in Taiwan where you go from Taipei down to Kaohsiung. Generally, if you want to drive your car, it takes you a good 7 hours, maybe 8 with traffic. You're blazing down there in 45 minutes. But these things are all raised above the roads. I've never been on any of the ones in China. But they're all up above ground. You know, you definitely have to work to try to disable something like that. But the last thing I would say is this whole debate about, you know, cars and technology and emissions and green energy and this, and, you know, humans now breathing as part of the carbon dioxide / methane emissions. Now they're blaming humans for 0.1% of all emissions globally because you breathe, you fart, you burp. Okay, you're a cow, whatever. But now they're running these ships 3,500 miles around from the Red Sea down past the Cape of Good Hope. So for me, since it's corporate America and corporate world that's transiting using their containers to sell bits of junk around the world, all discussion of global warming and CO2 taxes needs to cease completely until this war finishes. how much is the military belching into the atmosphere? That's a state secret on how much CO2 is emitted by militaries. I bet it's probably 20% of all global emissions is military activity, or things involved in production for the military industrial complex. I would say solidly 20% of global emissions are at that level, either of the military moving carriers around, tanks, Humvees, whatever, or the production of that, of the factories that, need the double shift, triple shift, you need the steel making, you need this, that, you need the electricity, you need to burn coal, you need to do all those things in support of it. And here we sit after COP28, and there's still, nobody's talking about the corporate 500 woke mob is now going to burn bunker fuel for 3,500 miles on an extra 2-week trip around the Cape of Good Hope. Just 56 ships today alone have taken that longer route. Until they cease that longer route, sending bits of junk across the ocean, all talk of global warming needs to cease. And these companies pushing their woke agendas, trying to say, well, you need to do this, that, or the other, and follow the green and get solar panels. No. Shh. Quiet, my friends. You're now burning 3,500 miles extra of bunker fuel to run your junk to sell it in Rotterdam. You're burning 3,500 extra miles, putting a ship on the ocean for 2 weeks to sell your bits of junk in Greece. No, there's no more discussion of global taxes on a carbon sequestration tax. You're running junk through South Africa off the coast in the roughest seas on the planet. And how many more ships are going to be going ashore there? How many more oil spills will there be because of this bits of junk across the oceans? It's insane. How much extra emissions coming off the bunker fuels in the ship tracks? And they still have the audacity to lecture you and me and the corporate wokeism when it's just so hypocritical now. And I encourage everybody out there, anybody that starts the global warming talk, just, point them to all these ships going around the Cape of Good Hope now. And you can't even have this discussion. It's a non-starter anymore. If corporate America and corporate world is going to put that much extra pollution to get you junk manufactured across in India or China, then there's no more discussion. It's the corporate world that needs to change, not you. Corporate everything should go out of business pretty much. We need to reintegrate everything locally. There needs to be no more corporate anything across this planet. The corporations in the military industrial complex are the ones that are polluting everything. Not you and me by using a straw when you go somewhere to drink a beverage. They're pointing the finger in the wrong direction, and we can clearly see it right now. Running all this shit. It's not going to be 56 any longer. It's going to be 200 to 250 after another week or so. And you're going to see how much global shipping traffic that is and how much it's going to drive your costs up. And you're going to watch weather patterns change all over Western Africa because of the huge amount of particulates that are being spewed out of all these ship tracks. And that heavy bunker fuel burning, man. Yeah, I tell you, look at the nitrous oxide. Go to Null School and take it and go down into the particulates of Null School I think it's IO, and take a look at their maps. And there's different particulate maps. There's wind maps. There's temperature maps. Click on the particulates and go down until you find the nitrous oxide map. And it should be a gray map. And you can go see all the ship tracks. And those things are going to start thickening up the cloud layers and base of clouds all along West Africa. So I don't know, man. We live in a twisted world now where the pollution is a good thing, but you're still not going to be able to have a car because the ships are polluting the oceans. You come and you're like, wait a second here. This is just kind of maniacal talk and toon world here.
The
Ransom, are you there?
cartoon world. Yeah. No, I got sidetracked when you were talking about that. I was looking at this supposed Chinese spacecraft that's emitting strong signals over North America. I've thought a lot about how they're going to do this. And you're right, when the way that they're setting it up is making it harder and harder, obviously, for the world to trade. So we went through that whole phase where you could probably get anything from anywhere through like 90s to about 2010. And they've kind of shut that down, where it's hard to get things from specific places. But can you imagine when the lights go out, how hard it's going to be to get things? And here, let me show this to the audience here. So supposedly this Chinese spacecraft emitting strong signals over North America has, gone over it the third time. What's it doing? They don't know, or they don't want to tell us. But how likely do you think it would be for them to just test out some new toys? I mean, say that's all it is. We can conspiracy theorize a lot of stuff, but if they were just going to reset stuff, wouldn't, it behoove of them to, test out some of their new toys? And it wouldn't surprise me if we, in our lifetime, in the next few years, get to see an EMP deployed and see what that looks like. And will we see it on the news? Because, they've been pushing several different ways through the news that an EMP would happen. One, not EMP per se, but the grid down scenario. And one of those is, of course, they've been pushing and pushing and pushing the idea of foreign actors hacking, or just some 13-year-old nerd in a basement somewhere shutting down a grid. But what's more likely, obviously, is the sun. But the second most likely, in my opinion, is a nation like Russia, the United States, or China deploying a large EMP device, not a nuclear weapon, but an EMP device, just to see how that would work out. Because, that would be a good test or a beta of what it would be like to detonate a couple of high-yield nuclear weapons above the atmosphere. So I just wanted to hear you, because we only got a couple minutes. What would be your thoughts on that? Do you think the way things are going right now, because I see China kind of back themselves in a corner in several different ways. However, they are very hungry to be the leader of the new world governance. So do you think that they could possibly do a first move, like something like that, like an EMP? Because I don't think that they could handle a kinetic war with the U.S. I just don't. They have a lot of manpower, no doubt. But I think we would overcome them in the long run as far as kinetic. Now, they're very smart people, and they have been stealing all of our intellectual property. So whatever's out there in the intellectual and probably military realm, thanks to the Clintons and other people, they may have a lot of secrets over there. So how easy do you think it would be just to put, a big cog in the wrenches there, or a wrench in the cogs, in the wheel, and just shut down the whole machine by just EMPing something, I don't know, like the West Coast of the U.S., and just put it lights out? And oddly enough, that's where most of the technology's coming out of, as far as the United States. You got Silicon Valley, et cetera, all through California. That's where all the AI startups are happening and stuff. It just lights out. What do you think, David?
Yeah, East Coast has a big server up near D.C. It's north of D.C. It's like 3 times larger than any other server on the planet. Hey, and I sent you that link to Null School, so click that open there. And if you go down, you'll see in like a little bit, about 5 references down, it says control, and 2 over, you'll see this little calendar thing. If you click on the calendar and just jump 1 year back, like the amount of ship tracks already coming off down around South Africa is just ridiculous. Like lines of ship tracks disappear off the ocean a year earlier. This is going to be the most massive pollution event. But China needs that foreign income. Yeah, they can align with the BRICS and have their new trading nation, but they need to, bring up the rest of the world, what you can consider developing world, for something where they can consume the Chinese goods. So Africa coming up with all the financing from Russia and China to finance, the new ports, the new railways, highways, the new Renaissance Dam area with all the hydroelectric coming up there. That'll be a new economic zone and like manufacturing hub area, a little bit north and west of Somalia there, up into Sudan and Ethiopia, Eritrea. I mean, it's got to have a consumer for the product. They can wipe out a nation But what's going to replace it? Because if there's no jobs back in China, and they're already having significant cultural problems and socioeconomic problems because they can't give their people enough work. Now, if there was a big enough war where they could reduce the population in China and reduce the population in America and still have a market to sell into, like Africa burgeoning, becoming a new growing area, and like I say, a new, the fourth turning, I do believe, is going to be dominated by Africa. America will dwindle, Africa will boom. So in 80 years, if we have this conversation, Ransom, you and I, Africa will be one of the wealthiest areas on this planet, hands down. So if something declines, nothing goes to zero. So first strike, okay, you take out your major market, then what? Well, if there's a financial collapse and you're still going to want to bring the market back up and start the system again, well, you got to have a system to start again. So where's your new consumers going to come from? Because, even if you take out 200 million people from China, you still got 1.2 billion. It's not like America where you take away 200 million and that's half the population. 300, 400 million is still only takes you down to 1 billion in China. 400 million people gone, that only takes you down to 1 billion. So the population is going to quickly remultiply there. And they're going to have the same problems again. So, what happens? The war scenarios, okay. Maybe the Chinese all immigrate after, you do the EMP strikes and you got 400 million Chinese will just suddenly take over America. Who knows? Maybe that's what, we look at these countries now with this type of people in them, races, etc. But maybe that's what happened 800, 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Who knows, man? History's murky. We can find direct descendants from Sumeria, the kings of England, but, maybe that's not the true story. I don't know. Take a look at the ship tracks over on earth.nullschool.net. It's going to shock you. Chemical. NO2 nitrous oxide overlay. Your mind's wide open on the solution. Corporate America woke is putting out to sell you bits of junk.
Thank you for listening.